Hello, everybody. Jonathan Pulley here with West Coast Weather. Today is January 26th, and we're going to talk about the series of storm systems and atmospheric rivers that are going to start moving into the West Coast over the next few days, continuing into the middle part of next week. You can already see that there's one atmospheric river starting to move in the parts of the Pacific Northwest right now, including parts of British Columbia as well. You can see the moist air highlighted with the white and blue colors on this mid-level water vapor loop, and you can see the drier air down in the tropical regions. That is kind of in the mid levels, at least. It's definitely a lot more moist down there, but you can see that the storm systems kind of drop out of the higher latitude locations, and they kind of pick up this moisture, and then they bring into the west coast as atmospheric rivers and frontal systems. And atmospheric rivers actually bring some of the most rainfall during the winter seasons, the parts of the Cascades and parts of Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. So they can be very beneficial, but this time of the year, if we get too strong of ones, as they can cause some flooding issues, as we've already gone quite a bit of rainfall from the fall and early winter storm systems. So any really impactful atmospheric rivers are not very helpful this time of the year, but we can still get some benefit from them, and they're not entirely bad. But we're also going to take a quick look at the extended forecast, as it looks like a cooler pattern may set up after these atmospheric rivers. We're not going to dive into too much details on that front, but we'll take a look at that as well. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now, taking a wide view of things on the European model, this is general ridge and trough positions, and you can see British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California here on the right side of the screen. Here's Alaska up at the top. Here's Russia over here, and here's Hawaii down here. You can see that we have the storm of troughs and storm systems that are setting up over parts of the North Pacific Ocean. This is going to bring a train of storms right into the West Coast. You can see that this ridging is right over parts of the Intermountain West and parts of the prairies of Alberta. And this is kind of directing that moisture northward in the parts of the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. If this was setting up a little farther south, we could be getting a potential for even stronger atmospheric river that would bring some major flooding issues. But thankfully, that's not looking to happen. But still, some pretty decent flooding issues are likely for parts of Vancouver Island, Southwest BC, where that main stream of moisture goes right in. And you can see that this conveyor belt of moisture just kind of gets pulled along from the tropics and from the Hawaii area. And that's why we call them Pineapple Express as well. And then you can see that we get multiple systems before finally the moisture train kind of stops, as this open trough kind of dives down over the west coast as we go through later next week. All models have kind of been showing this for a while now, even though this is over a week out by now. But you can see this trough kind of digs over the west coast, and this could bring a chillier pattern. I'm not talking about snowfall or really cold Arctic air at this point, as this ridge kind of needs to be a little farther westward, and this higher level ridge over parts of northern Canada and the northern territories needs to be a little farther east as well to allow that Arctic air to come down from the actual Arctic regions. But that's way too far out, and right now we can just expect a cooler pattern as we go. Now, looking at the 200 millibar jet stream height, and you can see the powerful 200 plus knot jet stream that's actually causing possible record-breaking air travel speeds over parts of the Pacific. And as we play this out, you can see this is what's bringing us all these atmospheric rivers and storms. These storm systems kind of break off of this end of it's called the exit region of the jet stream, and this causes the moisture to finally get pulled northward after this is chugged along most of the Pacific Ocean, and it breaks off and these storm systems form and drag the moisture in the parts of the western North America. But you can see this just continues as we go through later Tuesday and even in the Wednesday. But as I play this to the end of the run, you can see that what looks to be a wave break in the jet stream. So basically a wave break is when there's a storm system or some sort of disturbance forces the jet stream to get disoriented, and this can cause ridges and various waves that form downstream. So that's why it's called a wave break, and this can bring some potential for some colder storm systems to move over the west coast, or it can cause us to get a very large ridge over the region. So we need to keep an eye out for this. But that really elongated jet stream, which is a very signature sign of El Nino, looks to break up as we go through the 1 to 2 week time frame. Now looking at the UW WRF GFS from Western Washington, we can look at integrated water vapor transport. So basically it takes a section out of the atmosphere and measures how much water vapor that is, and it forms into a huge plot. And we can play this out. You can see our first atmospheric river kind of moving through, and then we get another one, a bigger one, moving in the parts of Sunday into Monday of this coming weekend and next week. And then we kind of just get multiple systems moving through, and then you can see the huge atmosphere right before them. We can't really play this out anymore because the WRF GFS goes only out the 96 hours on this version, but you can see the final largest atmospheric rivers going to move in. But thankfully this looks to kind of parallel the coastline other than parts of Vancouver Island, where it's going to slam into some of those mountain ranges on Vancouver Island, which is why it's called a rainforest out there. And it's one of the rainiest places in North America, or the rainiest place in North America. So it's no wonder why there's a rainforest out there. But you can see if this huge plume of moisture was kind of coming more west to east and slamming right into the Cascades, all that moisture would get wrung out and cause some major flooding issues over Washington, Oregon, and Southwest BC. But we're not looking at that situation, but still some flooding issues may be caused over parts of the mountain areas of Western Washington, Oregon, and Southwest BC. Now looking at the precipitable water anomaly in inches, if we play this out, we can really see the moisture streaming over the area with multiple rounds as we go through Wednesday before finally it slows down. And if we back this up, you can see the main atmospheric river kind of moves towards Vancouver Island, Southwest BC area. But if this was going a little farther south, Washington's kind of right on this line, so the Olympic Mountains are probably going to get in on this actually, and the North Cascades. There's going to be a pretty large rain shower over parts of Island County, including Whidbey Island and the San Juans as well. And Sequim is going to be the natural hot spot in Western Washington, with temperatures likely getting over 60 degrees there, as those downsloping winds going over the Olympic Mountains dries out the air and causing very little rainfall in the rain shadow area near Sequim and Port Angeles, and also warming the temperatures. And then now looking at the 3-hour precipitation type in inches on the European model, we can kind of see the precipitation time. So as we go through later this evening, you can see our first atmospheric river around a Cat 1, Cat 2, so a rather weak atmospheric river moves through. This is going to bring plenty of moisture as we go through later today into Saturday and Sunday. So a pretty wet weekend ahead for much of Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. Mainly west of the Cascades, but some of eastern Washington, Oregon, and parts of the interior BC areas may get in on some of this, and some of the mountain ranges getting some snow. But you can see most of the snow is only for the very highest hilltops and parts of Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, and the volcanoes. But you can see we get maybe a bit of a break on Sunday for much of Oregon and parts of Washington. But you can see this next atmospheric river, the stronger one of the couple atmospheric rivers moving through, starting on later on Sunday and the Monday. This kind of shows up right north and west of Washington state, but parts of the northwest Washington state and southwest BC are going to be in the main aim of this. And then you can see the storm systems bringing these atmospheric rivers kind of dive into northern British Columbia and die off, and we get into the wet portion. And here's the final main system moving in later on Tuesday and the Wednesday. You can see the strong low pressure system just off the coast. Thankfully, this is not moving in towards the coastline, or we be causing potential for some major windstorm, but it kind of dies off the coast and just leaves us in kind of a moist flow from the southwest, which brings a pretty decent frontal system even in the California as well. So we'll continue to watch that. Now looking at total precipitation in inches on the European model, this is looking 7 days out, and you can see that Vancouver Island is definitely the bullseye with 10 to 15 inches of rain showing up on this model. And you can see some of the southwest British Columbia Cascades showing up over 4 to 8 inches of rainfall as well. Washington Cascades may be getting 3 to 6 inches. The Olympics may be getting over 6 inches of rainfall, and you can see the lowlands may be getting anywhere from 1.5 inches to 3 inches of rain, potentially over 4 inches to 5 inches on some of the coastlines as well. You can see some of the rain shadowing effects. The European model doesn't have as much of a rain shadow, but it's also not a very high resolution model. So it's probably overdoing some of the rainfall for parts of Whidbey Island and Sequim, which they may only get 0.5 inch to 1 inch at most from these multiple atmospheric rivers. Now looking at the national blended model's total precipitation inches, you can see the same sort of thing showing up. And you can see that even through the next 10 days, California is going to be getting on some of the action. It actually has over 2 to 4 inches of rain for parts of Los Angeles down towards San Diego, and maybe even some parts of the Bay Area and almost the entire California coastline. So pretty good rain event coming up over the next 10 days as some of these specific systems start dropping south as the cold trough of low pressure moves over the west coast. Now looking at the ensemble mean on the European model for the next 7 days, you can see it also highlights all those same areas. Maybe not as much for California. The national blended models may be overdoing those rain amounts, but still 1 to 2 inches or more is possible for much of the California coastline, especially more possible for parts of Northern California where excessive rainfall outlooks are up. And I'll show you that in a bit. Now looking at the 6-day maximum forecast flood category for the rivers, you can see a lot of rivers over the next 6 days are going to start getting near flood stage, and some rivers may be approaching minor to moderate flood stage. This only goes at 6 days, and some of the last part of the main atmospheric river are going to still be moving through after the 7-day time frame. And so a lot of the rivers only respond maybe a day afterwards. So we're going to have to check this again in another couple of days to see if the river flood levels are forecast to be higher. But now looking at the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes. This is the atmospheric river forecast. And you can see atmospheric rivers are scaled from level 1 to level 5 from weak to exceptional strength. And you can see our main atmospheric river, which is kind of blending in for parts of the Oregon coast with not really much of a break from later today through mid next week. And you can see it's showing up as a 72-hour atmospheric river with integrated water vapor transfer approaching over 750 units, and that kind of puts it in the moderate to strong atmospheric river, cat 3 to cat 4 potentially. But you can see anywhere from the Bay Area north towards central British Columbia has the potential for a cat 2, anywhere from a cat 2 to cat 4 atmospheric river. So definitely a moderate to strong atmospheric river moving into the parts of the west coast and the Pacific Northwest. Now playing out this total snow in inches on the national blended models, you can see really not much snow until we get later in the end of next week, in the next weekend, when that cold trough moves over the region, and that will bring for a potential for a lot of snowfall for some of the mountain locations, and maybe the chance of some higher foothills if the temperatures drop low enough. Now looking at the NAM 3KM, we're looking at the composite reflectivity. You can see the blue is snow and the green is just regular rain. And you can see if we play this out, this is what the radar may look like. You can see it's starting to move on the parts of the coastline as well. And when we play this through, you can see multiple impulses of lots of moisture moving into the Pacific Northwest, bringing potential for heavy rainfall to some of the area, especially the mountains. As we go through Saturday and the Sunday, another wave of moisture moves through before we get a bit of a break later on Sunday, before we can see yet again early on Monday that our main atmosphere river moving in the parts of Vancouver and Western Washington starts showing up on the end of the model. Now looking at lightning flash density on the HRRR, you can see that there is potential for some lightning over the next day or so. Especially I'm worried about on Saturday in the parts of Sunday for Oregon and parts of Northwest California, where some of that moisture and the instability in the atmosphere builds up, and there's going to be potential for some thunderstorms down there. Now looking at daily 2-meter max temperatures on the national blended models, you can see that it's actually starting to get pretty warm and almost record-breaking temperatures potentially over the next few days for parts of Western Washington and Oregon. You can see that Los Angeles is approaching over almost the 80 degrees today, and even the 50s for the Willamette Valleys and the Puget Sound region and parts of the Strait of Georgia. But as we play this out, look on Monday, the high temperature is saying 60 degrees on the national blended models for Seattle. And that's not very surprising with that moist flow coming out from the southwest, and with that atmospheric river going kind of farther north towards Vancouver, and that leaves us in the warmest part of the warm front. And you can see much of the California valleys approaching over 70 degrees down there. Even though California is a warm state, over 70 degrees in parts of the central valleys of California is almost record breaking, and there's potential for some daily records to be broken down there. But then you can see the cooling pattern as we go through later next weekend. Now looking at the National Weather Service of Seattle/Tacoma, Washington, you can see that there's hydraulic outlooks and some gale warnings and small craft advisories up for much of Western Washington. This is basically just giving a heads up that there's potential for some isolated urban flooding and some river and small stream flooding as well as we go through the next half a week or so. And there's going to be some heightened landfall potential as well, but landslides don't look to be too much of an issue, at least this time around. And looking at a nice graphic from the National Weather Service of Spokane, Washington, showing the warm plus wet weekend into next week. Small stream rises, clock storm drains, minor field flooding, clear snow around drains, especially for North Idaho, Northeast Washington, and the Cascades. And looking from going all the way down the National Weather Service of Los Angeles, they're showing the potential for the storm system to start going south into the late January, the early February timeframe, with a potential for 1 to 2 inches of rain coming in most of the areas, with 2 to 4 inches possible in the mountains and hills. Potential for some snow over 6,000 feet and some gusty winds up there as well. And then there's potential for even snow levels getting towards down to 3,000 to 4,000 feet, but we'll continue to watch that as that's over a week away. Now, looking at the excessive rainfall outlooks from the National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center, you can see there's a slight risk and marginal risk for parts of Northwest California and Western Oregon for the potential for some isolated flash flooding issues out there. They're not looking that much of an issue, at least for Washington, Oregon, Northwest California. This would also extend in the British Columbia and likely would be higher levels as well, but unfortunately, this is only forecast for the United States. And you can see as we go through the 2-day time frame, that's Saturday in the early on Sunday, marginal risk extending up to the Washington Cascades as Washington coastline as well. And looking at the 3-day excessive rainfall out, like the marginal goes up towards the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. This would also be extended in the British Columbia with probably a slight risk as well as that some of that heavier atmospheric river moisture moves in there. And then going all the way to the 5-day outlook, also highlighting the Olympic Mountains and parts of Northwest California, some of those storm systems continue on midweek. Now looking at the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center, this is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for February 1st through the 5th. You can see a below average temperature starting to show up as this is after those main atmospheric rivers move through it and showing that potential for that trough to set over the West Coast. And looking at the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, a huge bullseye in the southwest United States, including parts of Arizona and Utah, Nevada, and most of California as well. And you can see near normal for parts of northwest Oregon and Washington, as that potential for the storm systems to go a little too far south for the excessive moisture to continue in Washington, but it's going to move into California, which probably needs it a bit more than Washington, especially as they have been dry the last few years, except that pretty big rainstorm last January. Now looking at the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, this is for February 3rd through the 9th, showing the potential for below average temperatures to continue for much of the West Coast and actually intensify. In the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, pretty much the same with the bullseye in the southwest where parts of Arizona getting in on the rain action, and below average precipitation possibly moving in the parts of BC and northwest Washington as that cold air kind of brings in some dry air. So plenty of stuff to still watch as we go into early February. Well, that's it for this video, everyone, and I hope everybody found this video enjoyable and informative. Just please hit those like buttons, subscribe buttons down below, and also hit that notification bell down below if you don't want to miss out on any new videos I make. It helps the channel out and it's much appreciated. We got multiple atmospheric rivers coming into the region over the next few days. We can see the moisture on the satellite right now with the first system starting to move in. There's potential for some flooding along some of the coastlines all the way from northwest California all the way up the southwest British Columbia. And so please don't drive over any flooded roadways if there are any. This doesn't look to be a major flood event, but there is going to be some localized areas that could get some decently bad impacts out of this. So just be weather aware and stay safe out there. I'll likely have another video out either tomorrow or day after tomorrow on Sunday and talk about this atmospheric rivers again, and also take a slightly longer look at the extended forecast, as well as that some of that cooler air looks to move down as we go into the last few days of January and the early on February. So take care, God bless, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.